everybody. Welcome to Pealed Back's LiveCast Conversations with, as always, I'm your host, Gene the Enjoyment Coach. And on today's episode 67, we have Robb Gilbear with us. Robb's journey hasn't been your typical one. He started his first business as a teenager and has done cubicle time in big multinationals, toured from coast to coast as a DJ, and spent half a decade as a people and culture leader in award-winning tech companies before launching his company, Growth Habit. Through it all, he's been driven by the desire to understand what makes businesses thrive, regardless of the market conditions, and what truly makes people more confident, joyful, and impactful. He's helped more than 150 entrepreneurs from countries around the world launch and grow their businesses since 2019. He is passionate about helping people create new realities for themselves and works with coaches to help them define their unique value and message so clearly they become magnetic in their own dreams. Robb, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I love the intro music. It very much reminds me of the West Coast festival life and the West Coast stuff that I'm used to. It's got great music. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, no worries yet. Well, I personally use it just as a way to get some dancing in before we get moving. Got to shake up the energy, and it's a little bit fun to set the tone on the right pace. All right,
go for it.
Go into it.
No, I was just gonna say I was worried. As soon as you started the countdown, I was like, I have to go to the washroom, and I was looking. I was like, can I do it? And I had the fastest pee of my life in that 24-second window.
Well, we're glad that we're able to add that little 40-second break. And we're very glad to have you back in time for the show. I thought I saw you scooting back. I was wondering what you were up to. So tell us a little bit about your journey. You've lived, from the sounds of it, like in what we were talking about before the show, you've had some three kind of significant career pivots in your life. Let's talk a little bit about what that's been like for you and how that's led up to, and I know we'll talk about the book here shortly, but where that's led to you to documenting that into where you are today.
Yeah, so music was a refuge. Music was something that allowed me to escape when there was struggles at home when I was younger, when my parents were fighting, when my mom was going through depression. And so my earliest memories are my mom playing disco and funk records around the house and us getting to enjoy it. So it's been this constant, and my love of music and love of connecting music led to me being a DJ and a music producer and running record labels, which was career number one, which was incredible and so much fun, and got to travel and see things, try things, be places. But then there became a point where it really wasn't serving me, and the unhealthy lifestyle that came with it, the late nights, the drinking. And I got to a place where I hated myself and I was depressed, and it was in a really difficult, dark place and forced to kind of change. And I had there's some periods where music, would be going well, but then had children, had life responsibilities, and I did go work a little bit on the side. So I had some HR jobs, nothing too serious for a while, but then went all out. I had a really awesome stretch with music, but then I hit that dark part where I had to decide, who am I? What do I want to be? This isn't working out. And it's interesting. That transition was tough because at that point, 2 decades of who I was, how I met people, where I met my wife, now my ex-wife, and where I made friends, how I made money. So much of who I believed myself to be and my identity was wrapped up in it. And that transition, it nearly killed me. It was a very, very difficult transition from who I thought I was and what the world, I thought the world expected of me. And then I found a place within the HR stuff. I found places where it wasn't just human resources, because I hate the term. It's humans are resources to be sucked and siphoned dry like batteries and discarded. It's terrible. But then I ended up in places where it really was about people and culture. How do you create an environment where people feel supported, where they can show up their full selves at work, where they are learning and growing? Then I did the last 5 years were in tech companies where, the intent at minimum was really to create a better place. And sometimes it actually was. But there was always this nagging feeling that I was meant to be doing something else. And coaching has been constant. And I didn't call it that. When I was a kid and people came to ask me to listen or ask for advice or came to me to be a sounding board, I wouldn't have called it coaching. When I was working fast food jobs in high school and I was the go-to person in my social groups and whatever, ended up being a crew trainer at McDonald's and then a part-time manager or whatever. I didn't call it coaching, but it's been consistent. And my favorite part of the last jobs I had before I launched Growth Habit was coaching the CEO, was developing new leaders, was helping people see a new potential approach to things and helping them have ahas. So yeah, making this last shift was much easier than the previous transition. It felt a lot more natural. It wasn't jarring. And now I don't feel like I work. I don't feel like I have a job. There's some things that aren't as fun as others, some administrative things that I haven't been able to outsource yet or whatever, but I love what I do. Like I look at my calendar, I'm like, I'm excited for the day. And that's a feeling I have most days.
That's a beautiful thing. Like big part of what I work towards is helping people be excited when they put their feet on the ground. It sounds like you are definitely living that life, which is awesome.
Yeah, and it's glad that this is something you help people do, because for a lot of people, I don't think they think it's possible, right? We grew up seeing our parents do something they didn't really like, or maybe they dreaded for the sake of paying the mortgage, and then that's just and then suck it up. And then when you're 65, if your back and knees haven't given out yet, and you were lucky enough to save enough coins, then maybe you'll get to enjoy a few years of your life when you're half in the grave. It's just.
No, and I agree with you. Watching so many people go through that, and like especially that older generation. I still remember like my grandfather talking about like he was always active, always had like some hobby that was keeping him busy. It's just like, look, all my friends retired, and those who didn't have anything, they like 2-3 years later they were dead, right? Like, and that's a real thing, and that was something that's always like stood out, is like life is far too short to be miserable. Like what are we really doing here? And part of life as well is that we kind of got to go through that to understand what's on that flip side of that coin, right? Is like we talked about it before the show got started, is you don't know the good without the bad, and you don't know the ugly without the beautiful. Like it's all just one coin. It's that perspective of where are you looking at it, what are you taking from it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes a propensity to try and think that you can have the good without the bad, or you're only supposed to have the highlight moments without the dips. You can't separate the two. You can't break them apart. Yeah, I like the way you said that too. I am grateful, not just for what I've seen other people go through, but yeah, for my own experiences. Like I've been through some terrible play, but I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't, I wouldn't wish it on anyone else, but I wouldn't change any of it, because it's put me right here, right now in this conversation with you, or just all the things that I get to do with my life. So yeah, I really like the way you, what was the catalyst for you? What was it? So that story with your grandpa's interesting. What was the catalyst for you to like, enough's enough? Was there like a moment?
Oh, I thought I was supposed to be asking the powerful questions here. That's a good question. You know what? I have one that's like so like 2014. So this isn't about like when I transitioned to what I'm doing now, but like like to think back about like some real catalyst moments is sitting in my car and just was in the process of like just a brutal divorce and a child custody issue, which is all good now. But it was sitting in my car after I've gone to the doctor thinking like, my heart, my blood. He's like, your blood pressure. How old are you? I'm like, well, I think I was like 34 at the time. Yeah, I would have been 34. And he's just like, your blood pressure should not be where it's at. Like, tell me about your life. I'm like, this is what's going on. He's just like, you probably came in here thinking you were going to get some depression pills. I'm like, I can't handle any of this anymore. He's like, try this first. We're going to get you to like, have you ever meditated? I'm like, I don't have time to meditate. He's like, you do now. Tell me about your workout and your exercise. I don't have time to exercise. You do now. And so I sat in my car after that appointment in the driveway, and I can still remember this clear as day. It's just like, you got a choice. You can either keep going the way that it is right now, and you're going to be early in the grave, or what's the underlying catalyst here? It's just like I've been avoiding like getting out of my comfort zone and like just staying in this defensive pattern, and this one message was like, you're going to play now outside of your comfort zone. And from that point on, everything else was just like, it was just like clear. It was like a light switch went off, and it's just like, oh wait, when I get out of my car, I went back and signed up for the gym, started working out, started doing meditation, started like doing all these things that I would have never done in that previous life, because I was playing defensively, trying to like not lose anything. And then all of a sudden it's just like, well, what if like mistakes weren't a bad thing? Well, that was a crazy idea, right? And I joined this group called the JCs, and like their motto, and our motto still is it's a safe place to fail. And so like I joined it being super shy, being like had no, like my friend group was like destroyed, and hell, I became like the president of the organization, 3.5 years later, and I've just done all these other things by just that one shift is like play outside of your comfort zone. You don't have to like, and anybody who's listening, I do not recommend like taking massive leaps out of your comfort zone. Play just beyond your edge. And that's what I learned going through that. That's like kind of that aha moment is like, can you play just beyond your edge? How about for yourself? We'll flip it back around. Where was that aha moment? Sounds like there was a couple baked in there, especially in that first job transition.
There's been a few. Before I answer it, I just want to say I'm glad I asked the question, because part of me is like, you're not supposed to ask questions. You're the person on the show. But I felt that nudge to ask it, and I'm glad I did, because it's an incredible story of you being in a difficult spot where you're struggling, depressed, overwhelmed to the point where you thought, and what a wonderful doctor. Because we know there's plenty of other physicians that wouldn't have asked those questions. It would have just been quick to write the script, here, take the pills and go. And it's cool now because I get the sense that you're playing that role for other people. The other people are coming to you, and you're not a doctor, but you're playing that role of like, there is another way. And you can
100%.
prescribe meditation. You can prescribe playing at your edge. You can prescribe taking a different approach. So I'm really glad that I did a faux pas and asked you a question. So
no, man, I love it. That's why we call it Conversations With, because like I jokingly try to be like, oh, I'm supposed to be on this side. Be like, no, this is a two-way experience. So I'm grateful and appreciate the question.
Awesome. So there's definitely been a few, and I think the one that's maybe most relevant. How dark do we want to go? All right, so I'll start with the more recent one, which is a little lighter. It's an appetizer, and then we'll get to the dark stuff. So most recently, 6-figure job, leadership role, growing company, being inboxed weekly by recruiters for other opportunities in an industry that's growing, and in a relationship. I was lucky at the time. I was in a relationship that was very healthy and supportive, whatever. So by external metrics, like I succeeded. Like check all the boxes. Where's my prize? Like I was there. But anytime that I stopped, anytime that I took time, anytime that I went, on my little bit of vacation I could take to get away or whatever, or anytime I actually avoided or turned off my inbox from work, I was overwhelmed with this feeling that I'm meant to do more. I'm meant to have other impact. I'm playing small. And I was afraid of it, and I avoided it for a while. And for a little bit, my I'm going to fix this is I started entertaining the recruiters in my inbox, and I started interviewing places. And I was at a second interview, 2 co-founders sitting across from me. End of the interview, we're 90 minutes in, and it was a throwaway question: where do you see yourself in 5 years? It was a BS question, and the word coach fell out of my mouth. And it surprised me as much as it surprised them. And because I'd thought it quietly, but was never comfortable enough saying it publicly. And, because my defeating thoughts was like, the world doesn't need any more goddamn self-help people. Who the hell am I to think I can coach? Who's going to come to me and trust me to help them? What authority do I? All that self-defeating crap. But from that moment, and once I said it, it was like it was out of the cage. And when it was out of the cage, there was no getting it back in the cage. And then I started taking, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, what does it look like? Where do I find a mentor? What courses do I need to take? How do I? And I went on a very intentional path. That's the more recent one. And then the one before it, when I was leaving music and didn't know who I was anymore, and I was still drinking. Then I'm a few weeks away from 8 years of not drinking at this point. Divorce. And divorce to me meant I'd failed not only as a marriage, but I also failed as a parent. And then I was like, okay, so I've failed the kids. I've let them down in the worst way possible. Who the hell am I? I don't like myself. I couldn't even look in the mirror and like the person I saw. I was getting blackout drunk all the time. And I didn't know, I was going to be taking on all this debt, leaving the marriage. I just terrible, terrible place. And I almost hung myself.
Yeah.
I was 40 seconds away, 25 seconds away, belt around my neck. I was that close. And at the last moment, I had this ping that all I'm going to do is take this unbearable pain and transfer it to my children. I'm going to hand this to my children, and they're going to have no idea what to do with it or how to do with it or anything. And I took the belt off my neck. I stepped back down on the chair. I cried, and it was a different kind of crying because I've been crying at that point for weeks, like uncontrollable, depressed, upset, hating myself, like banging my head against the wall, like make it stop. And those were tears of relief. And then from that point forward, it was like, okay, what do I do? How do I change? How do I started meditating again, started going to yoga, started reading things that inspired me, changed the people I started spending time with, started drinking less, slowly inching my way towards recreating a different kind of existence.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. That's it's a very personal story, and it's the that moment of going, I'm going to pass this down. And I think that in itself is a powerful like message. But then that next part where you talk about the tears weren't the same as they were before relief.
Mm-hmm.
Was it like a weight off your chest to be like, oh, I can actually do this?
Yeah. Well, it was like, I can do this. And then as I felt like I have to do this. Like I really, I want to do this more than I want to do anything else. Like I want to figure this out was all of a sudden way bigger than I want to end it.
Right.
So yeah. And it's crazy now because now the kids are older, and now I'm helping my daughter with her essays or dropping her off at house parties or spending like quality, hilarious time with our son. And just to think that I could have missed all of this time. Like we're 8 years later at this point. Is that about right? 8-ish years later, 9 years later. And to think that I could have lost all of this and everything to come. Yeah. And it's a story I wanted to share and I avoided sharing. And I thought like there's probably some good in sharing it. And then I went to a celebration of life. I went to someone else's funeral, and it's another friend who'd taken their life. And at this point, unfortunately, I know way too many people who have decided that there's no other way out, and that's the path they chose. Driving back from that, I turned to my partner and I said to her, I'm going to share my story publicly. I'm going to talk about this because I think if it just helps one single person, it's going to be worthwhile. And it's scary, but I really want to do it. And I said that to her, but months pass. 5 months, 6 months. And I didn't do it. I didn't talk about it. I drafted a post. I didn't post it. I thought about bringing it up. I didn't bring it up. And then what happened about half a year later, I was in a coaching conversation with someone who, one of my clients was having a really tough day. They were in a dark, dark place. They shared really openly what was going on, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what it was like. I held space for them. I helped them kind of process it. And then I shared my experience, and I shared what I'd been through. And I shared a version of the story that I just shared with you. And the connection that we made in that moment and the gratitude they showed for me. And they're like, thank you. Not only, have you provided the space for me, but now I feel really understood, and I appreciate you sharing that. And that felt really vulnerable. In that moment, when we got off the call, I turned on my phone. I was crying because I've been crying in the conversation. It was very emotional. The end of that conversation was very emotional. And I was tears rolling down my face. It's ugly. Like I'm slobbery. It's messy. And I recorded it without thinking, without editing, without scripting, and I just hit publish and I put it on LinkedIn before I could regret it. And it got 25,000 views, hundreds of likes, so many comments. And there's plenty of stuff in the comments that made me think, God damn, this is worth it. Like, thank you. This means a lot. I've been whatever, blah, blah, blah. But the DMs, the private messages I got from people who said, I can't post about this publicly. I don't want my coworkers to see this, but this means everything to me. I'm not alone. This means so much. The thank you. My uncle did this. The private messages. It's really, really, really made it worth it to share. So I feel like I have to share it now, and I want to share it. And I'm glad that I'm talking about it.
I think that's just really that the point about the DMs is like we underestimate, especially as a lot of content creators, I think underestimate how many people are actually looking. Like it's like a small fraction that will comment, or I guess small fraction that will like and react, and an even smaller fraction that will comment. And it's just like I've seen those experiences as well, where I post something like from the heart, and like I've gotten those DMs on a smaller scale, but it's just like, oh, I didn't even know other people were watching or what this can mean. So like what that message is if there's anybody watching this part of the show right now, it's like, share it, because there are so many people that are going through the exact, a very similar experience and probably feel so alone in all of it. And that's a scary place. Not only are you having, like, you're in a crisis, you think you're alone. You think no one else has ever gone through this. Be like, I don't think there's anything under the sun that is truly alone on that you have, that somebody else hasn't been there. So if you've got a voice and you've got a platform, take a moment to open up from the heart. It doesn't need to be polished every time.
It really doesn't need to be. I think that not being alone piece is the part that we don't realize or we underestimate. And it's for a tool that creates so much connectivity. The fact that you and I now know each other and we're doing the show, like there's just so many examples of getting to connect with people. It can feel isolating. And the point about, you didn't even know they were paying attention or watching, or it's so true. And there's two reasons why it's big, especially on LinkedIn. But one, so you and I are similar ages, which means we remember when social media was new and everything about it was exciting. And if something made you half smile, you gave it a like, you gave it a comment, like it's just. But now we're so inundated that you can see something, think that's awesome, and still scroll past because we're so overwhelmed. Yeah. And then particularly with LinkedIn, it is very lurker heavy. It is tied to people's livelihoods. It's tied to places that they work or businesses that they run. So people are a bit more hesitant there to like or comment on stuff than certain other platforms. But it is being seen. It is. People are seeing the stuff, and it is worth sharing. It really is.
Oh, 100%. Like, yeah, no, like this. I just want to say thanks again for taking it and opening up about this stuff, Rob.
I appreciate you providing a platform where I felt totally comfortable and no hesitation around it. So, my hope is there's maybe one individual who's listening to us right now, who's hearing this and realizing that they're not alone, and it's okay that you're struggling, and that there's other people who can relate. And yeah, the amount of people that are silently struggling, that don't talk about it, don't feel they can talk about it, don't know where to go to. It's nice. There's a lot more talk publicly about mental health. The shift I've seen in the last 5-10 years is immense, but it's still taboo. And especially there's more pressure for men to like suck it up, buttercup, and to put on your tough face. And no, you're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to feel emotions. You're allowed to feel overwhelmed. You're allowed to not know what the hell to do next.
100%. And it's interesting, especially being like, well, we're both Canadians. Like Nova Scotia in last year noticed that they had a spike of men calling their 211 number. So it's like a crisis number. They spun that out into just a men's only number. I think that had up until September this year, it's 1,600 calls to it. And between September and the end of November, when the report went out, that went up to 2,200. In a little province like Nova Scotia, they have a crisis number that is always staffed to support that. Part of my day job as well, I still work for Canadian Men's Health Foundation, and like that's a big part of our mission, is to help support men, because you're not alone. And it is really, at the end of the day, some awareness, growing some brotherhood around those things, and taking the steps to move forward, because it doesn't take a Herculean amount of effort to start to make a positive shift. It just takes making one choice a little bit differently than you were making the choices that got you there.
So true. That's a really great way to frame it too, that not only you're not alone, but I know it's so overwhelming and it seems so hopeless and so dark in those moments, but one small shift, one small decision, one little thing can make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, like that. So the one site that we host is called Don't Change Much, for that exact reason. It's all filled with like articles and posts just about like, how can you make those little shifts? And that's a big part of, like, I think a lot of coaching as well, is like, you're not going to make huge leaps. You're going to make little steps every day. And then you're going to all of a sudden look back, go, whoa, a year's gone by, 2 years have gone by. Like, I don't even recognize that life anymore. Be like, that's how it happens.
I love it. Yeah, because the perfect analogies for that is an airplane or a boat. And if it just shifts by like 1 or 2 degrees and you go a couple kilometers or whatever, you're not going to see a difference. But if you travel for 10 hours, or in this case, like for a year of your life or 2 years of your life, the delta gets really big.
Yeah.
So
Well, you want to get into your book a little bit about like, obviously, you know that you talk about your whole journey through it is like, was this idea of sharing your story part of like the driver for it, or what was your driver for putting this down on paper?
I started laughing because initially, it did no way, shape, or form was I thinking it was going to be a book about my journey. And did I ever think that my first book would be the story of my life? And part of me would have been like, you know, who am I? Does anyone care? But I set out that I wanted to write a book, and it's a goal that I've had for a long time. A lot of people have, they want to write a book. And I never got around to doing it because I didn't know what it would look like, and I didn't know exactly what to include in it, and there's lacking clarity around it. But last year, I decided for 2021, it really was like one of three things that I really want to do this year. So I really wanted to write a book. So I started talking to people, started searching out book coaches, talking to experts, and had a couple different people say, Rob, you have programs, you're a coach. Take one of your programs, put it in a book. It'll be easy. Bob's your uncle. It'll be really great for your business. It'll be top
Yeah.
of funnel. If you're listening to audio only, I'm doing air quotes. It'll be great top of funnel to get people in. And it logically made sense. And I tried for a little bit, but it didn't feel right. It felt forced. It felt laborious. And something seemed off. And then I had a couple things happen in short order. One, my partner, she loves stories. She's always asked me to tell stories, and she loves hearing about different things I've experienced. That story of suicide, I shared that online. I shared some other craziness. And I had someone who I really respect, who's actually a client of mine, say to me, I don't know if you know this about yourself, but you're a really good storyteller. And that's not something I would have previously said about myself. And then I realized, what if it was just a collection of my stories? And what's the goal of this again? Okay, the goal is this to help people feel more joyful, more impactful, more creative. I was like, that could do it. When I put these stories out, they seem to really resonate with people. And I'm thinking about, you know, Jack Canfield's Chicken Soup for the Soul is just a collection of stories. And thinking about some other books I read, those are just a collection of stories. And then once I made that decision, it was so easy. I wrote
Just float out.
Yeah, I wrote the bulk of this in 7 days. This in a hotel. I locked myself in a hotel, created an enclosure of hyper focus. Most of it came out in 7 days. There's a couple chapters that were added after. I went through some cycles with my editor as far as making some changes or updates or making things connect a little bit better. But it was easy once I had made that decision. It was easy once I was leaning into the path of least resistance. It was easy once I gave myself permission.
Yeah. That's incredible. So 7 days, you get the bulk of this book.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like on day 8 for you?
It was elation, and it was partially because I decided mid-July that I was going to definitely write the book. And that's when I had the aha. I was like, oh, it can be a collection of stories. It's still going to help me achieve the bigger goal with which I feel my purpose is. And then once I made that decision and had that aha, I declared it publicly. I posted, I'm writing a book. My intention is to write the first draft in the next 45 days. And just start create hyper accountability publicly.
Yeah.
And I hired an editorial and story coach to help me with things. So I had created immense pressure on myself, which works for me. I don't want to just put a caveat here. If you're thinking about doing something like this or for any other project, just check with yourself, be honest with yourself. I can create hyper pressure because my mental health is in a really good place because I've done a lot of work, because I'm in a really supportive, loving relationship, because I have all these other healthy habits. So there's immense stability. So if I put immense pressure on myself, it's going to help me get the results I want. If you just put immense pressure and your relationship's dicey, your financial situation is not good, your mental health, it might not go well. So I just want to put an asterisk there.
I think that's I want to take a moment just to celebrate that as well. Like when we talked about earlier, it's like entrepreneurship is like, it looks sexy on the outside, right? But like you put that kind of pressure on a faulty foundation and it's going to crumble around you, right?
Yeah.
So understanding what the pressure is that you can hold, and what I think as well, like what pressure can you withstand enough to like move forward. I always flip that around with clients talking about like working out is like, if you go hit the gym and like try to lift the heaviest thing you've ever lifted, be like, you're going to get hurt. But if like you gradually build up to it and you're constantly adding resistance, well, those muscles are going to grow over time, and you're going to do it in a much more sustainable and healthy, balanced way.
I like that. That's very much along the lines of the going to your edge that you were saying earlier. And that's the equivalent of it in the gym. Because yeah, go ahead and go try and lift the heaviest thing, and then you're going to be sore, you're going to hurt yourself, you're not going to go back the next day. Versus if you just keep going to your edge and you build up momentum, and you can have the compound interest of the small changes that are stacking, that'll make a huge difference.
Oh, 100. And it goes right back to your ship analogy too, right? The compound interest is like, that's why that 1% daily or even weekly has massive returns in life.
Big time.
Well, how did you determine how you handled that pressure? Like, did you have to build up to it? Because obviously there's been situations in your life where the pressure has grown and it's caused some significant pain, but from that, some beautiful things have come.
Yeah. So I think, beyond me being honest and kind of doing a check-in with myself, I turned down some other offers, or someone else collaborating with on something else. I told them we were putting it on pause. So I also kind of did inventory, and I went to my partner and asked her for permission. I was like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. I'm determined to do this thing. I think it'd be really great. I think it'd have a lot of positive impact. But for me to do this, I'm going to be drawing for some other buckets. It means I'm going to be working some evenings. It means there's going to be some weekends where I'm pushing to hit a deadline, and got her blessing. And I think that allowed me to kind of to create the container that I wanted, which was a pressurized environment to do something that I wanted to do that I knew I'd be proud of. So yeah, in the past, there's no way. And past me that didn't like himself, past me that still drank, past me that didn't keep my word to myself, past me that wasn't feeling physically fit or healthy, past me. Versus now it's much easier. And then, or just from the communication point of view, past me could have had all of those things, check, but then maybe would have not gone to check with my partner. Would have just like, I'm just going to go do this. And of course that would have other implications and other blowback.
Yeah. Well, I think that, ties into your post today about balance. Is like, how do you look at balance from a different perspective? Is like, balance doesn't always mean like everything's 50% or all the wheels always all perfectly round. Like it's interesting the way that you framed it, because I frame it around harmony as well. It's like you listen to a song, and if all the notes were all the same, kind of a boring song, right? Like that's not fun. Where you have, like, where you were talking about it is like, there's sometimes that you're gonna have to spike up. You're pulling up another section of your wheel of life, and that's a big focus. But knowing to bring it all back and to keep in check with all that stuff, like that's an interesting add-on, is to like doing that audit of going, okay, what are all the other sections of my life that are important, checking in with those too, because sometimes those are people, not just like these concepts you're holding in your head, like you're sharing, going, hey, this is where I'm going, can we all be on board with this? Yeah, that then is just like rocket fuel to go.
Yeah, they have full permission. I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry about whatever. And it's just I've got the blessing, and then I can go. It's huge difference maker, and it's interesting hearing you reflect it back. Yeah, seasons for me is the way I like to look at it. Or there's buckets, harmony. The way you said it too. Wayne Dyer used to have a quote: "If there's two people in a relationship and they're identical, there's one person too many." So it's like the harmony thing. If all the notes are the same, well, then it's boring. But it's the same thing in a relationship too. Yeah, you need the variety. You need the difference. You need the different flavors and variety.
And when I think like that, adding to that permission component, is just like that's a respect thing too, right? Especially as adults in loving relationships, or what can you do to make you thrive for what it is that you're obviously, a big part for you is impact, joy, and helping people with purpose deliver more. So how can you do that and still have like respect and like I don't know what the right next word is, but like it's like that faith in each other to go, all right, this is your season, go make hay while the sun's shining, and I'll be right here afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to frame it. And I think part of I went through a divorce, which means I've been in at least one relationship that didn't do well. But it's safe to say that I've been in other ones too. And of course, I always brought something to the scenario. Of course, there was some amount of lack of maturity, lack of communication, lack of something, versus right now, it is by far the healthiest, most supportive, most incredible relationship. And it goes down to the foundation that we don't call each other boyfriend or girlfriend, or we sometimes say partner, but we call each other and consider each other care buddies. And that we see our role for the relationship is to care and support each other and to help each other's learning and growth and care for one another. That's the table stakes. And everything is built on top of that and has allowed for the most rewarding, most mature, most open communication relationship I've ever had.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's a like just a powerful. That's one of those mic drop the mic moments. There is like building that relationship in such a like based on caring, straight up, and knowing that those can be that can be the pillar that supports everything else. Not support it like I'll go back. That's rocket fuel. When that's working well, you can stretch and do a lot. Case
Yeah,
in point.
yeah. I feel that way right now. And it's fun too, because now I'm able to say to her that I feel like she's a huge part of this, that I feel like there's some things that are happening. There's a certain amount of indicators that this is going to be a dramatic turning point in my life and in my business. And I'm grateful for her because of the support, because of the buy-in, because of the environment she helped create. You know, her name's in the acknowledgement, her name's in a couple of the stories, but beyond that, I really feel that she's a part of the book because of the rocket fuel that she handed me by saying, yeah, no, you go do this. And I fully support it. And I think it's awesome. And let's do it.
It's incredible, man. It's a beautiful thing. Thanks for continuing to share even more of this of the what's happening behind the scenes. Right, this is all about pulling that curtain back, and you have lived that very fully on this episode.
Thank you.
So, what is next? Like, so you kind of like alluded to, like you feel like going through all this, something's is there something that's been unlocked, or is this like another like level for you that you're like, oh wow, didn't know this was here.
Yeah, I'm at a new place, and it's interesting because someone like you, someone like me, that's been through difficult things, that's reevaluated who we are, who's decided to rebuild ourselves in a very intentional way. We've done a lot of work. I've done therapy. I've done lots of coaching. I've been to weekend programs. I've done intensive stuff. Like, I have spent a lot of time thinking, reflecting, processing. However, going through the process of writing all those stories and reflecting, and what was the meaning of that? What did I take from it? Still was a new level of catharsis, was a new level of unlock. So there's that. And then I mentioned earlier, I think it might have been before we were even recording, that I carried shame around music. And my first journey was around music, and I did well, whatever. But I didn't realize until I wrote the book that I still carry some shame around that. I've released that. So now I feel freer in a way that I haven't before. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm probably going to do a music project this next year. And I'm thinking about how that integrates everything that I'm doing. But I think kind of beyond that, you can't mess with me. Like, I'm so happy and joyful and content with who I am and why I am and what I'm doing, that life's going to have ups and downs. Things are going to happen. And I feel that I really am on purpose, where I'm supposed to be at the right time. And the amount of sharing, processing, being vulnerable, and putting it out there is attracting the most incredible people. Like, incredible people are showing up, want to work with me, are showing up, like they've read the book and they want me in their corner, which is so funny. It is doing in spades what the book coaches told me if I had just done their, like, take my course and spit it out. And that felt so wrong. But it is totally doing it from a different point of view. People are showing up feeling connected to me, feeling understood, feeling seen, feeling so. I
think
feel
from that perspective, you're not handing them a book about mechanics. You're handing them a book about a soul, right? And they're looking at that, going, "Wow, he was this open in this book, and holy cow, all this is like touching me." Like you sharing your story many times, like I felt it. Like we're doing this over the internet, and I can still feel that energy coming out of you. So somebody who's taken the time to go through those stories and understand what's being poured out looks at it and goes, "He's speaking to me. Oh my God."
Yeah. So it's fun. It's crazy. I'm so grateful. Like, incredible people showing up, and with that kind of energy, with that kind of gratitude. Every day without fail, since I put the book out, either, and many days it's both, I am getting personal DMs. 1, 2, 3, 4. I got one the other day. It was 5 paragraphs long. Why it was incredible, how it touched them. They couldn't put it down. How the chapter about my relationship with my father, how that's changed the way they're changing their relationship. They're taking their partner away this weekend because of the reading the divorce. That, holy cow. Also, people going out of their way to publicly post about it, share about it, talk about it. And that means that it's really impacting people. Like, if none of that happened, I would still be really grateful that I had done the project because of the growth I've got from it. But also the other piece I've mentioned is my relationship with my parents. This was very tough for my parents to read. They both bawled their eyes out. I went to go visit my parents a couple of weeks ago. And my mom gave me this beautiful letter. We hugged, we cried, and my dad and I had the most incredible conversation. I'm learning things about them that they struggled with that I never knew. Like, if that was the only outcome, it would be incredible. But it's the feedback from people and how it's touching them. This relationship with my parents is better than ever, and I feel more in sync with like who I am and accepting of who I am and feeling fueled to move forward. So yeah, I feel like I'm on the early stages of some. I don't even know how crazy this is going to go. Like
Yeah.
I know it's going great places.
Well, and I think just your statement of you can't be messed with. Like what a state to be in to fulfill and to enjoy that entire ride. Knowing be like it may like from far out look like this, but it's gonna be like that the entire way through and be able to be like, bring it, bring it. What else? What do we got? Oh, is that all? Okay, well let's keep going. And if you didn't have that, you wouldn't. Yeah, I don't even think. Well, I don't think you can take that ride until you get to that point of being like, you can't fuck with me. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. I had someone show up at a workshop I did a couple weeks ago, live in front of 30, 40 people there. Instead they found the book boring and asked me why I wrote it. It didn't faze me. Like there was like a microsecond of like, huh? And then I asked a question. I was curious. I was like, help me understand more. And then I was able to say, the book's not for you. And I had no cortisol, no stress reaction, nothing. I was like, the book's not for you. It's not meant to be for everyone. And that's cool. And I thank them for coming. I can't imagine. I can't imagine how that would have like thrown me for. I'd still be processing it. Like I'd still be crying about it. I'd still be mad. I would have punched a hole in the wall. Like I can't imagine how a past me would have dealt with that.
Yeah. And isn't that just incredible? Be like, it's just all it would take would be like one like negative response compared to like all those beautiful things you just talked about to wipe them out. But now in this spot, you're like, that's curious. Okay. So it wasn't for you, but thanks for still being here and thanks for reading the book. I appreciate it. You can keep hanging out if you want, but we're going to keep going now. All right.
And the best part about all of that, because I led with curiosity and I led with empathy, and I didn't have a reaction. I chose some of my response. At the end, when I stopped recording the session, they stayed around, asked some more questions, got speaking with them, and then they shared, and they had an aha. They said, I'm realizing that I went through some difficult things. I dated someone who was an alcoholic. I had an abusive relationship. And I think what happened is your stories triggered that in me.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, and had I had a negative reaction, how I had a defensive reaction, had I got mad, we wouldn't have got there. They wouldn't have had that aha. I wouldn't have had that moment. So it's the most human moment possible. So yeah, it's awesome.
Well, I think there's so much power in being able to like have like somebody who's not a fan and like conversate with them, see them as a person, be like, I've always found in business, like the clients that would be like angry or like really difficult, be like, you just see them and meet them where they're at without like judging them. Be like, 9 times out of 10, they turn into like your biggest supporters. And there's something wildly unknown to you that's underlying all that. And you can touch on that and see them, be like, I don't know. I always see that as such a great opportunity to be like, hey, it's going to hone your edge and it's going to be an opportunity maybe for them to be seen.
Yeah, I think that's a truthful thing. I've experienced it too, and being curious and not reacting and just seeing them as a person, and then amazing things can happen.
100%. Well, Rob, remember how I said at some point I'm going to look up and be like, oh, we're at the 40-minute mark? We're at 45 minutes. And you know what? We haven't even dropped the book title below. So anybody who's interested, down in the comments, there's a link right to the book. And I want to be respectful of Rob's time as well, because he's got a busy schedule. So what is the name of the book?
The name of the book is Die Before They Do, From Selling Drugs to Lunch with Jim Carrey, Stories of Struggle, Near-Death Experiences, and Creating a Life with Meaning.
Incredible. And like I said, the link's down below, so definitely go check that out. It's going to be worth the read. Anyways, Rob, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. Before we let you go, I ask every guest the same question. So we're going to hop in my time machine. We're going to go back 10 years. What's that one piece of advice you would give to yourself?
Forgive. Forgive is the word that came up. But it's forgive. Some of the best things that have happened to me is me forgiving my father, me reconciling that relationship, me forgiving myself. And I think, the sooner I could do that, the better. My joke in my monkey brain was like, tell yourself to buy Amazon stocks, but that's stupid. It would be about forgiveness, because I think that's why I feel that you can't mess with me right now, because I've really forgiven myself, and I've forgiven the people who mean the most to me, and I've learned the most from that. And I think it actually ties into what you were just saying before about being curious if someone shows up with a negative comment or whatever. And there's what is understood as a societal, like people would say, like, of course you're mad, of course you hold this grudge, da da da. But if there's a Mandela quote which I love, which is, resentment is like drinking poison and expecting it to kill your enemy.
Yeah.
And then forgive. But I don't know that I want to change anything. I'd just go back. I'd probably just give myself a hug and maybe whisper, like, it'll all work out.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
But forgiveness and both that answer are our first time to that question. So I always love getting new, unique ones in there.
Cool.
So that was very cool. All right, everybody. So Robb, thanks for being on the show. Go check out his book. You can find him on LinkedIn at Robb Gilbear. And as well, I want you to find one thing to bring some forgiveness into your world today. And until next Wednesday, I'm Gene, the Enjoyment Coach. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks.